Hello. Now, for those that aren't aware, they just recently announced that the next ranked season is going to start February the 10th, which is the upcoming Friday. As usual, I will be ranking the ships. They are purely T7. This ranked season is going to be T7 only. So I will be ranking the T7 ships into different tiers, as I usually do. Now, I will have 4 different tiers. First we have the top tier, which are the ships that I consider the absolute best. Then we have the good tier, where ships that are quite good or very good but don't quite reach that top tier. And then we have the competitive tier, where ships that do okay, they're not particularly stellar at their task. And then we have the not recommended, or well, you could call it the shithouse tier, where any ships are more of a burden on your team than anything else, and they're the kind of ships you kind of have to drag across the finish line in order to win the game. So, well, and of course a disclaimer, these are my opinions based on my own experiences. People will disagree. There will be people who have favorite ships and think they should be higher, people who have ships they hate and think those should be lower, blah 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 blah. That will always happen, so keep in mind these are my opinions. I'm going to start off with battleships. Battleships, there's one that goes straight to the top tier for me, and that's the Nagato. Now, for those that aren't aware, the Nagato actually used to have a much thinner armor around its forward citadel. In fact, if we go into armor layout on this hull, so if we take this away, this part here, well, let me show you a picture first. You see the thickness of the armor, how thin it is. Well, that was in the past. These days, the armor is actually 289 millimeters. This was fixed about 4 months ago in a patch where they realized, oh shit, they forgot to buff this armor to the actual values, so they fixed it. So people tended to eat a lot of silly citadels right here in the front from surprising angles and such, so that has been fixed. Overall though, the ship is very tanky at 65k HP. It's a nice balance of pretty much everything. It has very, very strong guns. It can overmatch, well, Colorado's, Nagatos, and pretty much any cruiser will have trouble angling against it. You can still do massive damage, and it's pretty accurate. So I feel like this ship is pretty much the whole package. The only weakness really being brawling, but you shouldn't be brawling in this ship to begin with. It's not really a brawling type of battleship. So that's the top tier for battleships. In the good tier, I would place the Scharnhorst. Now, the reason why the Scharnhorst doesn't quite make it to the top tier is because, well, people can make it quite weak if they just angle against it. Angling against these 283mm guns means that the ship will do little to no damage, and the HE isn't exactly impressive at 3.2k alpha. So that's not going to be too impressive. Now, before rank 5, I would say this ship is probably top tier as well, because people don't angle that well, so you're going to have an easy time farming citadels, and it has good armor, good AA, it has torpedoes, it handles well, like all of these things. It's overall really great. The issues are just that when people angle, it becomes quite useless. Now, competitive tier, I'm going to place both the Colorado and the Gneisenau there. The Colorado, I actually played it last time there was tier 7 ranked, and I quite enjoyed it back then, but there has been several changes that has kind of forced it out. First of all, one of the main issues is that this is a brawling battleship, and the Gneisenau has appeared and the Scharnhorst has appeared, and both the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau are better brawlers. First of all, they can't be citadeled. Second of all, they have torpedoes. So the Colorado has pretty much been power shifted by this power creep all the way to the end of the spectrum. Now, the reason I put this in the competitive tier and not the not recommended tier is because the Colorado is still a good battleship. It has big guns. Even though the HP pool isn't that big, it can heal up a lot, and it has the best torpedo belt of them all, especially if you're going to be sitting in smokes a lot, as I predict you will. Being able to tank those incoming torps will probably be very strong. So there's no real not recommended battleship. But I do think that the Colorado will suffer being power creep, and the Gneisenau, on the other hand, while it does have many strong things like the torpedoes, the speed, the armor, even pretty good AA, the biggest issue really for the Gneisenau is that it only has 6 guns and it has German dispersion on those guns. And when you only have 6 of these guns, well, the thing is, in ranked, shooting DDs is highly important, and there's probably going to be these short bursts of time, for example, radar or plane spotting a DD or something like this, and you have this short period of time where you need to nail that DD. And this ship is really going to struggle because, well, 6 guns with German dispersion, you have to pray to RNGesus himself to actually land a hit. Hell, this ship struggles shooting cruisers with the dispersion. So really the only chance it has is to get into brawling. That's where the ship can shine, and how much brawling you can do depends heavily on your team. So that's why it's going into the competitive tier and not the good or the top tier. Right, moving on, well, I might as well cover carriers. That's very simple. Both the Hiryu and the Saipan are top tiers. Last ranked season, the Hiryu players actually at the medium average tier, Saipans tended to dominate Hiryus, but at the absolute top tier with like very experienced carrier players, it switched around with the Hiryu players dominating the Saipan players because the Hiryu has more damage available to it as well as having good air control. So those two are very closely matched depending on player skill. Saipan and Hiryu are very competitive and both are top tier for this reason because they are both very strong ships. But then we go straight to we skip all the way to the bottom to not recommended if you want to find a ranger, because there's really no point of playing. It doesn't matter if you're going strike ranger or you're going air superiority ranger, this thing is still complete garbage compared to Hiryu or Saipan, and literally no point playing it at all. So this is straight into the not recommended for the carriers. Moving on, we have cruisers. Sorry about that. We have cruisers. Now I have 2 top tier cruisers. The first one should be pretty obvious considering my high opinion. It's of course the Belfast. There is little reason to not put this into top tier. It has the insane concealment of 8.7, being able to outspot even Atlantas. It's just great concealment, extremely healthy. It has access to 3 consumables, of course. Defense against torpedoes in the smoke, that's going to be so useful, smoke of its own, and of course radar, and in epicenter where spotting enemy DDs and killing them is so important and pushing them out of the epicenter is so important, this surveillance radar is going to be absolutely incredibly valuable, and being able to use it from your own smoke, it's just a monster. The guns themselves, of course, have only gotten stronger with the introduction of IFHE. You can burn down ships with these. You have great range at 15.4. You can even stealth fire from 13.3. So the Belfast is just the whole package. Absolutely top tier. The other top tier for me is the Flint. It has access to the US smokes, which of course bloom for 27 seconds. So you can make, for 27 seconds, you can make this massive smoke screen for your team that lasts for 2 minutes. It has a smoke screen active for 121. It has the US DD smoke on it. So you have access to this absolutely fantastic smoke screen on a cruiser, so the DDs don't have to waste their smoke. In fact, there's only 30-second downtime between the smokes. So absolutely fantastic on that. It deals a ton of damage. It has fantastic anti-air. It has long-range torps. The Flint is just extremely strong. Definitively a top-tier pick for me. It has weaknesses, of course, being squishy and such, and of course being radared and such, but optimally these things will rarely happen to the Flint, especially since if there's risk of being radared, it can even position behind an island and just shoot over it. It can protect itself from torps in the very same way. So this will be a top tier, well, just like the Belfast for the team, highly valuable. Good tier cruisers are absolutely going to be the Myoko. The Myoko is an old dog at this. It was my top tier pick last season, but because of the power creep, it's only a good tier pick now. The Myoko, of course, makes it easily to this tier simply because it's so goddamn tanky. Not only does it have almost 40k HP, it actually has some of the best armor of these as well. When you angle in this thing, you can take a surprising amount of damage in this ship. Of course, it also can get great concealment. It has a lot of firepower. It's very quick. And it can get low detectability, and the torps are absolutely nasty because you can launch, well, can I click that right thing? Here we go. You can launch quite a lot of them. So this is honestly still very, very competitive, and I would never be disappointed seeing a Myoko on my team. The other ship that makes it to the good tier is the Fiji. the Royal Navy Fiji. The Fiji, in fact, has the same firepower as the Edinburgh, which is a tier 8 cruiser. It has a ton of firepower. Well, you see how many guns it has. It has torpedoes, 8 km torpedoes. It has access to its own hydro and smoke, of course. It's good concealment. Even the AA on it, well, it's not good, but I mean, it's still decent. No defensive AA, but still, with AFT adding on, you can get 7.2 km on this. It's overall just going to be a great ship, and of course it has access to heal, so unlike all other cruisers, it can regen some of the health it's losing, which makes it very valuable. So those are my 2 good tier. Competitive tier is actually surprisingly going to be Atlanta this season. IFHE has helped the Atlanta a ton, meaning it can actually deal a lot of direct damage, and most importantly is the addition of the surveillance radar, 8.5 km radar. With DDs smoking you up, it will rely on the team significantly, hence why I call it competitive tier. It will rely on the team being able to smoke it up and basically help it out to be able to get the most out of it, but I still feel that this season the Atlanta is actually competitive. I wouldn't call it good, I wouldn't call it top tier, but I would call it competitive, mostly because of IFHE damage and the radar. And now we move on, of course, to the not recommended cruisers. We can start right off here from the Indianapolis. Much like the Atlanta, it has radar. Unlike the Atlanta, it doesn't have the great concealment. It doesn't really have, well, I mean, kind of maneuverability, but doesn't have the massive AA range and the unlimited AA that you can get access to on this ship. This thing just eats citadels, whereas the Atlanta kind of tends to get overpenned and such. This thing, this bucket, just eats citadels. It can't shoot over islands the same way it can. It has a very long reload on the guns. I think it's 15-second reload. So you can't even get that much value out of those guns when you do surprise someone. It's a clumsy Pensacola that happens to have radar. So simply not recommended. The other not recommended, well, you heard me say Pensacola. The Pensacola is up for a buff soon. They are going to buff the concealment on this ship, but I still would not, even with the concealment help, this is still not a recommended ship. It's still too paper, it's too large, it's too clumsy. It doesn't add anything to the team that another cruiser could. Continuing on with the not recommended, we have, of course, where is our lovely, lovely York. The York is a weird German cruiser that actually has better HE than it has AP, but it kind of has to give a ton of broadside to be able to use all its guns. It doesn't really bring anything besides maybe German hydro. Questionable. A YOLO ship doesn't even work as a YOLO ship, because you kind of just can blast it out of the water. It really doesn't bring anything to the table that the other ones couldn't. It doesn't have too good of a DPM, it doesn't have too good of anything. The Shores is actually one of the ships that has a lot of DPM. It's a great fire starter, but the big issue with the Shores is naturally the turning circle. 900 meters, the health pool is only 32k, it's paper thin armor, and it eats citadels pretty much everywhere. It's one big citadel. In fact, let's see, can we actually show? All of this is citadel. So pretty much any hits on this is going to be a citadel. You don't even need to hit the waterline because the citadel comes so high up from the water. Even DDs can citadel this through this 75mm armor. I've citadel this thing from 10 kilometers in my Gremiashi. So it's a paper ship that explodes and can't turn, so once again, not recommended. Anyway, what do we have left? We of course have destroyers left. Let's move on. Once again, I have 2 top tier picks for my destroyers. My first top tier pick is actually going to be the Leningrad. The Leningrad is surprisingly strong, and I feel like it has been undervalued. First of all, with the captain with concealment expert, you can get the concealment down to 6.6, which is highly competitive. It's one of the fastest DDs in the game. In fact, I think only this one and the Khabarovs can reach these speeds. It handles surprisingly well for such a fast DD. The AA is garbage, but on the other hand, it's got 2x4 torps that do 8 km, 60 knots, good speed, decent reload, not too bad detectability either, and of course the guns are monstrous on it, especially with AFT, and the fire chance is 11%, so you are a great gun and torpedo boat in this thing. In fact, it's one of the better premiums in the game, and this one will be definitively be competitive. So I definitively see this one being a highly competitive DD. It can deal with smoke, it can take on any DDs in fights and beat them, it can contest points because of the low concealment, it can torp smokes, it's fast enough to get out of situations and easily outrange others. It can even stealth fire quite comfortably from past 12.5. So many advantages to the Leningrad. Of course, the Bliska, it was my top tier DD last season, last time I was tier 7. It's still my top tier pick for the same reasons. Great gun power, great torpedo power, better at stealth firing than the Leningrad, but and I think much better turret traverse, of course, but overall they play quite similarly. The Leningrad, if I remember correctly, this one does handle a bit better, 610 turning circle as compared to Leningrad's 690, but both are very solid, very strong DDs. Now going into the good tier, my first good tier pick would be actually the Sims, because with a good captain you can get very good concealment on this ship. Let's put my gearing captain on here so we can actually demonstrate this, so we're not talking absolute crap. Let's put our gearing captain on the Sims. There we go. You can get the same concealment as on the Leningrad. Now, you don't have the gun power or the torps of the Leningrad, but you do have something that's incredibly valuable for your team, and that's of course smoke generator. A 2-minute smoke, just like the Flint has, whereas if we look at the Leningrad, this one gets a 85-second smoke, Bliska gets, I think it's the same, 85-second. So you have significantly longer duration smokes. This one of course is significantly more nimble as well, 500-meter turning circle, incredible rudder shift. The Sims handles like a god. And it's got defensive AA, which means if there's a lot of carriers, well, it's unlikely you're going to be able to strike this one out. In fact, the Sims handle so well you can get away with using propulsion mod and dodge torps in your smoke. So the Sims, because of the great smokes and the great maneuverability, resilience against carriers and such, will be my good tier pick. Once again, not top tier, because in a straight up fight against the Bliska or Leningrad it will get wrecked, but it shouldn't really be played as one who will go for a straight up fight with those. In fact, it should be played more team oriented with the smokes, whereas Leningrad and Bliska are more selfish DDs. Moving on to my good tier pick for selfish DD is actually the Shiratsuyu. Let's see if we can find out Shiratsuyu. I'm probably pronouncing it like a pleb, whatever, I don't give a shit. Here we go, Shiratsuyu. Now the thing with the Shiratsuyu is of course that it can reach the best concealment of all these DDs at tier 7. You can reach, I think it's 5.9 or is it 5.8? Regardless, you can beat out all the other DDs in concealment. And that's very significant, because that means you have the spotting advantage over all the enemy DDs all the time. And anyone who has played any sort of competitive knows that being able to spot the DDs before they spot you is huge advantage. You force them to turn away, you force them to flee, you force them to smoke. Your team can just shoot at them. You don't even have to open your guns, you're just spotting. So the spotting range alone already makes this a good tier ship. The second thing is, of course, this is the ship that can launch, that can use the torpedo reload to launch two of these torpedo volleys at once. So you launched 8 torps and then you launch another 8 torps, and with the expected smoke camping meta, while being able to not only be highly undetected and outspot, but still be able to absolutely wreck anyone camping in smokes, it's pretty obvious why this is a good tier pick. Once again, not a top tier pick, because if it gets spotted out, it will struggle outrunning them. 34 knots of speed, not to mention it doesn't have that much, it has pretty weak guns, and the health pool isn't that impressive either. So in a straight up fight, not top tier, but definitively a good tier pick. Moving on to my competitive DDs, I would say the Mayhem is still competitive. It's not good because, well, it has huge issues with its concealment. Where's our Mayhem? Here's our Mayhem. Biggest issue is, of course, regardless if you upgrade the hull, your concealment is going to be pretty damn shit, and you will be detected by pretty much everything. On the flip side though, you have US smokes, which are great. You have pretty good torps, in fact. Well, let's see, these torps, you have pretty good torps. They are fairly slow, but the cooldown is pretty long. Well, it's actually not that bad, and they don't do too much damage, but they are 9.2 km, so they are pretty solid torps overall. and you have a fair amount of gun power as well, or you can go defensive AA with the Sea Hull. So this is a overall competitive DD. It doesn't have the nice things that the other ones do, but overall it's a very sturdy one. And I actually do have a not recommended here, and that's going to be the Akatsuki. And, well, actually I have two of them, sorry about that. It's going to be the Akatsuki. This one, just like the Shiratsuyu, it can't really gunboat. It doesn't have enough guns. I mean, the reload is simply too long on these guns. It definitely doesn't have the health. The turret traverse is too bad. It's not a good gunboat at all. The health is pitiful. You're not going to be gunboating anyone. On the other hand, however, it doesn't have access to the fantastic torps, the Shiratsuya, the huge volleys. You can only launch 3x3, which is 9. I mean, 1 more per volley, but you're not able to launch those massive volleys, and you don't have the concealment either. In fact, if you looked, the Shiratsuyu has 700 meters better concealment, which for DDs is massive. So the Akatsuki is without doubt a not recommended DD. It doesn't bring anything to the table at all. Another one of these that don't bring anything to the table is the Kiev. That goes straight into my not recommended as well. It has multiple issues. First of all, the nerfed HP pool means that it's quite squishy, which for a gunboat that's detected all the time, that's horrid. It's also got the worst concealment out of all of these by far. I think with Concealment Expert you get this down to what, 8? With camo and this you get it somewhere 8, 7.98, something like that. So your concealment is garbage. Your torps only have 4 km range, which means they're going to be garbage because you won't be able to actually use them against anything. The only thing you really have is the guns, but for that we have the Leningrad and the Bliska that are fantastic at it. Your smokes are Russian smokes, so nothing special there. And you're just too squishy, you don't bring anything useful to the table in the Kiev. There's no point. Absolutely not recommended. Another one, of course, a new upcoming for our not recommended list is the Maas. Where do we have the Maas? Here we have the Maas. It actually has decent torps, only 8 km range, not too much damage, but they are fairly fast. Concealment, however, once again, one of the things that suffer. You're not really going to be outspotting anyone. The HP is pretty nice, but the guns and the spotting issues, I mean, with the Hydro, the only thing maybe that brings the heart, maybe this could be a competitive, maybe I'm being too harsh on it, maybe this could be a competitive just thanks to the Hydro being able to help you against enemy DDs, but ultimately this will never be the guy that goes into the cap and contests it because it's too easy to counter these German DDs. You outspot it, and you outspot an enemy DD, you force him to smoke up because it takes... Actually, never mind, this is going to be not recommended because I'm just thinking about facing a Leberecht Maas. If I see a Maas push in, first of all, I will see him coming because I have a concealment advantage. I will... my battleships will open fire. He will have to smoke up because, of course, German DDs eat additional damage from AP. He will have to smoke up, but German smokes, of course, last the shortest amount of time of all of them. They are pitiful. I can't even remember what the duration at this tier was, but it was something absolutely sad. So then I just wait out his smoke. And when the smoke runs out, he can't do nothing but flee. Like, what is he gonna do? Maas is just a non-threat. I don't see this thing being a threat at all. It's not recommended. Absolutely. I think I have finally managed to cover all of the tier 7 ships. Pretty sure I managed to cover them. If I forgot someone or something, I have no doubt you will point it out in the comments. Anyway, this was my ranked tier list. I will post one more concise version in the comments so you guys can go there and rage about how wrong I am. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next time.